I'm not sure if I need to have any kind of introduction. I think it's fairly straightforward in the sense that the theme that was unpacked was, in a way, revisiting the very essentials, the basics, as far as the understanding of what is behind it all and what this really is. So the emphasis, as you, and I trust all of you, or at least most of you, have picked it up, was on these two primordial primary movements. I'm helping myself with the hand now, that gesture, most emphatically exemplified through the breathing itself. The so-called outpouring and the so-called inward drawn, withdrawn wave, and the two waves is what creates this, in a way, a shimmering matrix of what we call existence. And these primordial, primary movements are reflected through absolutely everything that we do, everything that we experience. It struck me when the idea of putting together this online course was that somehow, though it seems very obvious, because the spiritual discourses are often given this subject-object reminder, subject-object, the subject experiencing object. And a lot of the discourses, a lot of the emphasis is being made on that creative tension between subject and object. Certainly when it comes to anything that can come under the umbrella of tantric teaching, but not just tantric, we always bring that reminder that tantra in itself is inseparable from the full scope of Vedic teaching, Vedic wisdom, which exemplified in that Trinity, if you remember, that Trinity of Rishi, Devata, Chandas, the seer, seeing, and seen. The togetherness, spoken of as togetherness of that Trinity, therefore spoken of as Samhita of Rishi, Devata, Chandas, speaking in that Vedic tongue. And that reminder is very important, and that reminder is there, always serves us to reposition ourselves in terms of what is actually going on and what this whole experience is made of. And yet I felt that the need was to bring this in terms of the two principal movements. The two principal movements, the movement which is essentially the exemplified in that outpouring of awareness out of its own plentitude. And in that outpouring, it is swelled with the desire to know itself, to experience itself. Hence, it immediately translates and breaks into the modalities that we then speak of as seer, seeing, and seen. In our immersions, live programs, we have now started introducing even the blackboard, right? Like good little children, we go back to classroom and do the drawing there, because this kind of affords this possibility for that direct, tangible, visual example of that Trinity. And we, of course, give it a variety of analogies, explanations. This one just now given from the point of view of Veda, that's Samhita of Rishi Devata Chandas, but we also speak of it in how it is addressed in tantric teaching of the Trikashaivism, from where Trikashaivism itself derives its name, because it means Trika, the three, and the three here stands for awareness, the power, and that where awareness conceals itself, as that Shiva, Shakti, Nara. Shiva, Shakti, Nara is the triumvirate, the Trinity that forms the basis behind every experience. Shiva here as awareness exemplifies pure subjectivity, forever subject. The power, the Shakti, exemplifies here that reflective awareness which acts as the power of that awareness to bring the manifestation forth and to withdraw this manifestation back into Shiva. With the third principle here as that Nara, the world, the individual, that what is so tangibly experienced by every single one of us as me, I, you see? And yet it's not a mistake in the design. It's not something that somehow an error in the template. No, it's all very perfectly, beautifully orchestrated, constructed with perfect symmetry. Out of this symmetry, a sense of beauty is born. We experience beauty, in fact, as a confirmation of that tapping into that structure behind every experience. So the experience of beauty can also be spoken of in mathematical, geometrical terms. And there were beings who did exactly that. Not that they were trying to pinpoint what the experience of beauty, but rather give the experience of beauty its legitimate status of not just some kind of flimsy, fleeting experience. So this third aspect, where the consciousness or awareness conceals itself, is what is forever known as object. Every object of our experience is where awareness conceals itself for the sake of experiencing itself in that and through that modality of that Trinity of Shiva, Shakti, Nara, or awareness, power, and myself or the world, because it is equal here. So this is what we do. We bring that reminder now over and over because it's very important. The time has come for us to overcome this, what I have sensed from quite early days, the predicaments that are run, we could say, amok in the spiritual discourses, in spiritual communities, from private discourses to conference halls and symposiums, where we're still trying to locate where is the culprit behind this calamity, whom to blame for this so-called ignorance, where is awareness loses its status. So Trikashaivism here is the beautiful, grand, eternal, perennial reminder that none such thing, nothing is ever broken, nothing is ever here in disarray, there's no calamity, everything is speak and span. It's beautifully orchestrated. This, what we experience right now, even at this very moment, right at this very moment, is how awareness conceals itself through that experience of its own pure subjectivity reflected in the object of experience. So therefore, from tantric point of view, every single object of our experience is sacred because it's Shiva in disguise. Its awareness concealed itself for the sake of its own sport, perhaps to rediscover itself. We can just enter a variety of reasons, some of them will be on power speculations. But what's important is to understand that there is nothing other than experience. Experience. Everything else is just a speculation. So therefore, we speak of it not in terms of some kind of taking on trust, somehow in advance of maybe future understanding. No, every single moment is an experience, whether this is a moment when everything ceases to exist, everything is withdrawn, let's say, in that state of nirvikalpa samadhi, in the deepest state of integration, aka absorption, there is still experience of velvety, beautiful sense of nothingness. Or we are in the marketplace of the world, in Istanbul, Bombay, you name it, New York, whatever tickles your fancy, where we are at the mercy of utmost expression of diversity. This is experience. And every gradation in between, every shade in between, from the totality of that self-expression through the means of that where, as it were, from the point of view of the limitation of the language, awareness undergoes a fragmentation. It still remains intact, and that's the greatest secret, that it remains intact amidst of every so-called seeming losing itself or seeming losing its status. It loses its status because there is no other way for the experience to fully take place. You see? So in other words, in the folk sense of how it is addressed, let's say in Indian subcontinent, it's the Shiva opens his eye, Shiva closes his eye. Whenever Shiva is closed his perception to his own essence, the world is a result, because the world is the very, very embodiment, manifestation of awareness, also known as Shiva. But soon as the Shiva has the desire to behold, or rather remain in his essence, the world is withdrawn. The world ceases to exist. And it is that tension, that creative tension, always exists between subject and object. Every experience has this capacity to go fuller and fuller into the extremity of what the experience provides. And likewise, every experience has also within itself inherently in the essence of the experience, the capacity of complete and utter withdrawal. Furthermore, perhaps even more importantly, these are not two opposing forces, although they are opposing forces, but by the virtue of these two opposing forces, this what gives the intimacy of I am experiencing this. Hence, it's inevitable that the theme of the seeing through the heart here was, in fact, revisiting the very early years of when I went out to teach, where the very first theme that was brought out was one of the principal doctrines in Kashmir Shaivism known as Spanda, which is based on the doctrine of vibration. It is this, the doctrine of vibration, that speaks of these primordial waves, that of the withdrawal and that of the outpouring. And these waves create that shimmering pool of experience, the matrix of interaction and overlapping, because it exists at infinitesimally minute, incomprehensibly minute level. And also it is expressed itself through all what we could speak of as grand cosmic events. And of course, it is to be savored, reflected on, tapped into by each and every one of us. And this is also the staff of creativity. This is the staff of artists, poets, musicians, scientists, anyone who is there experiencing that, what could be spoken of as finding oneself at the epicenter where all creativity streams forth. because that creativity here is the very, we could say, raison d'être of why we are here in the first place, in this body, in this world, as this body, as this world. So let this be a brief summary, kind of like an impromptu, improvised take on what the seeing through the heart in essence is. And of course, we felt it would be very fitting to include some of the rare meditations which have been introduced in live programs, and so as not to be recorded separately in a more, so to speak, clinical environment, but actually where these were brought out into the open and served as guided meditations in front of a group gathered for the purpose of immersing together. So this is an additional, I would say, value of those meditations that seeing through the heart contains. The four of them, the bread and butter, right, the very, very basic, right, that based on breathing, the Soham, and then three based on working with visualizations so as to directly work with pranic force that streams and comes out of the heart and is withdrawn back into the heart on a regular basis, because that's the innate esoteric anatomy of all movements, and all movements find their repose in the heart. Okay, so this just felt fitting to bring out into the open, and I'm very happy now to turn towards questions submitted in advance.